And hey, everybody, welcome to Wednesday, November 28th, October Business of Wine Course. And this is the Stephen and Tim show. We're now officially launching into week 6 and continuing the conversations about distribution, marketing, and sales. And then starting next week, we'll dive into the final chapter of things. And Wednesday, a week from today, I'll do a presentation on the world according to Tim, and critical thinking at its finest, or what happens when a master of wine has a nervous breakdown. You be the judge. So let's see, Stephen, anything? I think you had mentioned you had some things that you wanted covered.
Yeah, I was going to talk to you maybe later today at 2, was it?
Okay, great. So we'll take that offline.
Well, it's all good. Yeah, I think that might be best, actually.
Okay, fantastic. All right. So without further ado, let me go ahead and share my screen. And we'll start talking about the market and quantifying a market. So defining a market is to look at the place where business is conducted. So remember the 4 P's of marketing, and the price, product, and place was one of those. So originally the word market was the etymology of the word. It's where business was transactions, where goods and services were traded and so forth. Then it was kind of expanded to more modern uses and so forth. But the place determines one of the facets of defining a market. And so you might define it as just simply retail sales in the United States, or global, or down to a city, or so on. And it's going to be, the business is going to be conducted very generically in retail stores. When you use such generic definitions of a market or whatever, it's fundamentally useless. But you could say, well, we've got a division that covers that, or we're working with people that are specialists in that. You also have to look to the route to the market. What do you have to do to get your products there, and those kind of things. The second part of a market can be defined as the people who are participating in transactions. What's your target consumer, your target market, and this is where we look at who cares. What do people in these markets care about? What do they value? How do you promote your wine to stand out from the others? What's your price positioning? And so this part of the market is actually getting the mind share of a group of people. So when we talk about understanding the market, there's the place, and then there's the people. And again, I just hear it till I want to scream, oh, the millennials are this. And I've shared with you about my millennial sons and that kind of stuff. But even that doesn't, just to get to the millennial group, San Diego millennials are going to be way different from Charleston, South Carolina millennials, or New York, or San Francisco, or Iowa, or whatever. So this is the essence of marketing: the place and the people, then the product, and the pricing. Trying to find wine data is no simple task, and there's a lot of data that's available that is very expensive. So what we're going to do to look at, or what we're going to try to accomplish today, is getting an understanding of the uses of consumption and sales data. Where do you find it? How do you apply it or not? how do you filter through so that you can find the data that's specific to your business needs and go into your business plan? Now, remember that part of your final project is this business plan template. And we've gone through the winery overview and that kind of stuff, mission, vision, and goals, wine production model that you're going to incorporate, additional revenue generators. Then we start to get into the marketing section of a business plan, depending on what kind of template for a business plan you use and what degree of sophistication somebody has with business plans. I don't know of any case where you don't have your marketing section, where you're defining the market and the strategies. And so for the project that you're going to be doing to turn in at the end of the course, using this template, just type it in down here. The first is defining what's going on in the world right now, near term, for the wine that you're making, whether it's a $25 blend, a $200 esoteric Cabernet, or $2 Chuck. What's going on in the world? And there's a number of places, and I'll show you some of those today, where you can find these trends. And don't forget that supply and demand, what stage of supply and demand the world is in, has a dramatic effect on a successful business plan being executed, okay? Now, something that I learned many years ago when I was working with some really, really smart people from Intel and from just sort of general curiosity and how the tech world operates, we were creating a product, and it was server training programs for Marriott, Ritz-Carlton, P.F. Chang's, Starwood, Outback Steakhouses, and all these different organizations. And we were spending an awful lot of time on what the product was. What did people need to learn? How could we assess their knowledge of it, and so on. So we had the product was well defined. And then the two guys that were my partners from Intel said, well, we need to personify this. And I'm going, what in the world do you mean? And they explained to me that personification is creating a persona that represents a key group of users or your market, giving them a name, and then really getting inside of their world of how they operate, where they shop, where they turn to for information, who do they trust. If you're doing a wine education and training, where would that person actually sit down to do that education and training? And these were online courses. So the way the process went is we said, okay, the first one we did was Debbie, who was a favorite person of ours from the Hyatt organization. And Debbie is a server in the 3-meal outlet restaurant at the Hyatt on Wacker Way in Chicago. And she is 32 years old. She's a single mom. She has one child. She's doing this work because she really doesn't have the background or whatever. She loves what she does. She makes good money at it. She owns kind of a beat up laptop or has a home computer, and where and when she would do this training could possibly be, and then you start to, well, where would she sit down to do this training? Well, she would do the training at home. Oh, then we found out when we started to go back to our client and say, you know, this is how Debbie would use this, they go, well, we can't do that. They've got to be paid for their training time. Oh, well, you tell us then, because for us to know how to successfully deliver this education and training, we've got to drill into the behaviors of all the people that are going to use this product so that we can make sure that it's intuitive, it's simple, it meets their needs. Okay, does that make sense? And boy, did this really change my perspective on wine drinkers and who people are and what they're drinking. And it was kind of funny as I was thinking through this. I also then went into our discussion forum, and so there's a number of examples of products such as Opus One. Now, Opus One, this is great. Anne had talked about this Monday night, and she put up, she was asking about a relatively obscure, if you will, marketplace. And it's called the Place de Bordeaux. And it turns out it's not a place, even though it's called the Place of Bordeaux. It's if you will, it's a consortium of people who buy and sell top growth Bordeaux wines. And it's kind of an inner circle club, if you will, because it's kind of like an invisible market. These wines go to private clients, they go to specialty stores. So it's kind of like a network of buyers and sellers that do business, and they do enough business that they get a significant amount of the products that are released, and then they don't advertise them, they don't market them, they're not generally available for sale on the open market. So when you read this article, it's very interesting how this business is being done. And the big question I would have, and I don't know the answer, are they doing this because they can't sell enough wine in the US? If you think about this strategy, and that the marketplace where the business is conducted is through a consortium of well-connected and interconnected people buying and selling high-end wines, it does very little to enhance your overall global brand presence, because people, normal people aren't privy to this club or this group. It also is a direct pricing to the people in this consortium. That's how it's transacted. And then they mark it up before they take it to the market, which would lead me to believe that they're buying at low prices. So as you look at this article, you can kind of think in your back of the mind, wow, how would this work? Why would they be doing business this way? And if their business was robust in the United States and their business was robust in China, what purpose would this sales channel afford? Does that resonate with you, Stephen? And it's just it's fascinating. And then when we were talking earlier about certain allocations of wine, where people in South Carolina only got 3 bottles that's going through that would get into the stores, would get into restaurants and stuff like that. How much of the wine are they selling there? Or is it in and of itself a matter of brand strength and prestige, just to be listed along with the great Bordeaux and to be playing in that game? I don't know. So anyways, it's just kind of a fascinating look about that. Then another thing that caught my eye was the over-the-top marketing, and this is really great. So this speaks directly to where we are in the course right now also, okay? And as we're going through this part of the course, I advise everybody to look for examples of strategic marketing, and not just the high-end wines. Think about, how are people marketing Spinata or Arbor Mist? Who is that market? How do you define it? What are they actually looking for? Next Wednesday, you'll hear my tirade about wine and food pairing and why it's actually one of the most insane concepts in history for marketing wine. Oh, buy my wine, but serve it when you're having a roast pork loin with sun-dried cherry and an Amontillado sherry sauce and this and that, because that's what it goes with. Oh, so it doesn't go with my chicken tonight? Or I shouldn't have this with my fish because it's a red wine? And then what we've done is we've created all this pseudoscience and BS about wine and food matching to support something that actually limits the reasons for opening your wine tonight and drinking it and buying another bottle. So I'll give you an earful of that. All right. So going back to this, the uses of marketing data and consumer personas and all this, number one, it's to understand what's going on in the world, like we were looking at on the business plan template. Where are things in the supply and demand cycle? And this data could be also used to help to understand what are our grape needs going to be for next year? How much bulk wine are we going to need to get? What are our production capacities? And should we be cautious and kind of hold back, or do we need to be more aggressive? Because if as things are tending to show now, there's sort of a dip coming up. And so a cautious approach might be strategically a little bit better suited to what's going on with supply and demand. If demand is cycling high, then you tend to get more aggressive. You know, how can I ensure we're going to have enough grapes? How do I line things up so we can handle the production and those kind of stuff? Another use of wine consumption and sales data is for developing new products, but the challenge is that the data you're looking at is for products that were made at best last year, and sometimes products made 4 years ago. And so if you're developing a new product, how do you forecast demand in what categories? Will red blends be the hot thing, you know, in 6 months that they are today? Earlier, I talked about the Syrah dilemma. When Syrah was just, you know, flying off the shelves, everybody started planting, everybody started developing new products, and then boom, it hit the skids. So, as I mentioned, forecasting grape supplies, predicting your product production needs and volumes. The other thing is to use this data to look at measuring the success of products and your own product against other products in the market. So if you're keeping a very close eye on how you're doing versus the competition, then you really want to know what's going on in that category, and even with individual wines, which you've determined are your key competitors. And so this is all about the market share. What's the total market for a product? And it could be that you define your product in a very generic way, that it's by price and type, like a $25 red blend, or an $8 Moscato, or a $75 Napa Cabernet, or Red Hills Syrah from Washington, an Okanagan Cabernet Franc, or whatever. And so that in your marketing strategy, you're looking at what the total available market for your product as you define it is, and then what share are you going to get of that? And that can be really challenging if you're going to make a new Chardonnay. You say, well, how many cases of Chardonnays are sold? Well, the prices range anywhere from $3.99 to $399.99, and there's millions and millions of cases, so I'm going to get a 0.0002% of that market. And this is where you'd have to say, okay, well, I'm going to make an Okanagan Riesling, or I'm going to make a Washington State Riesling, or whatever it is, and then create some price parameters and so on, so that this becomes actually functional. All right. And then on a more specific basis, are things trending up or down? All right. For the market that you defined up here. So then we talk about the sales channels, and this is a key part, and have fun with this, finding 5 competitive wines that you're going to analyze, and then creating your value prep. Given that you've defined your product and you've looked at these competitors, how is your product going to stand out? What kind of value is it going to represent? What kind of pitch are you creating for the distributors, for a retail store buyer, to a restaurant buyer? And then if you're doing direct to consumers, or it doesn't matter, what's your pitch to the target consumer? Okay. All right. So this is a Nielsen report, and I'm going to send you guys some spreadsheets. They're a little bit old. They're from well over a year ago, but don't try and look too hard at this. I'll give you something a little better. But basically, Nielsen, and who's combined with IRI data and some others, they and I think is it JD Edwards or somebody? There are primary data suppliers, and the big companies can easily have $1 million a year budget for this kind of data. This stuff is expensive, all right? That being said, let me see if I've got this. When you get these slides, it's just a couple of slides today, but there's a company called PivotStream. And for anybody that's interested, go to PivotStream and ping it every month or so, put a little reminder. And a couple times a year, they allow free access to the Nielsen wine surveys, which is really, really kind of cool. And I'll show you what you get from there. So here are some data sources to check out. But before we start looking at those, let me show you the way information is organized, because this also then gives insights into the kind of things people are looking for in the data metrics. Hang on a second, don't look, I'll give you a headache. And here we go. All right, so I'm going to well, let's see, I think I can do this. I'm going to put this to full screen. So this is a period 26 weeks, total US, for a period ending in January 1st of last year. What I want you to get out of this is, number one, it's telling you in descending order from largest to least selling category. And you can see this is a macro category of nearly $1 billion in sales of Chardonnay. And then they're also looking at it versus a year ago for the category, and that the category is trending up. At even a more macro level, they've got this up here, which is the total market, and that the total US market for how this data is collected. Now, it's also valuable to know that this is scan data collected through stores, from Whole Foods to Safeway, those kind of things, but basically wine has to be scanned. So this is not capturing any online transactions. It does not cover an awful lot of independent stores. And it also doesn't cover a lot of restaurant transactions, okay? So knowing the source of the data and where they're collecting data from is also important in relationship to your product that you're looking to develop this for. All right. So what you can see here is Merlot was at this time was tracking down. One of the things that I do, just because it's a particular passion of mine, is the wine industry is completely ignorant about sweet wines, and we've got sweet wine phobia. We disenfranchise and mock sweet wine lovers. We're really a bunch of idiots because the French always love sweet wines. This is not a US phenomenon. This is not a Coca-Cola phenomenon. And your palate doesn't mature. We'll talk about this Wednesday. But over time, what we tend to do is totally negate this whole market. And so in 1997, I was doing work, 2007, I was doing work and I identified Moscato as the next big thing for a client. It was Sutter Home. And they looked at the data and they thought, well, you know, it's at this time, Moscato was like way down here, all right? And one of the other things is in defining the market, they said, well, there's just not a market for Moscato. And I said, how are you defining the market? And this was a product development conversation with some of the best marketing minds in this industry. They said, well, you know, they're sweet wine drinkers, so they're amateurs, they're unsophisticated and whatever. And I said, well, what if you had that all wrong? And then went on to prove that they had it all wrong. And what they were looking at is there's this large market, potentially 40% of the total US, French, and UK market, and possibly 70% of the Chinese market that simply want sweet wines. They're abandoned. Nobody's powerfully marketing. Nobody's upselling them to other products. And I said, so if we were to define the market, I want you to take these products. I want you to take these products. I want you to take these products. I want you to take these, and these products. And they say, why are you highlighting these? I said, because the total available market for Moscato is sweet wine lovers. And nobody's marketing to them. Nobody's telling them they're sophisticated. And so we went through the whole rationale of why Moscato was this big opportunity. And believe me, none of these categories were even on the radar back in 2007, okay? So what we did is we systematically went through all these wines, and we're not even talking about the slightly sweet dry Rieslings or Meiomi Pinot or stuff like that. And we just went through and we were able to identify a market opportunity that was every bit as large as Chardonnay, but that nobody was marketing to. Look at all these here, right? And these are all sweet wines. So what happens is when you're defining the product and the market opportunity, you've got to look beyond the obvious and see if you can discover that unknown route to market, that unknown underserved market, so that you can go in and say, okay, well, if we go through here and add all this stuff up and then create the strategies, create the products, and so on and so forth, and as a result of this process, There's flavored wines down here and all sorts of stuff. In 7 years for Sutter Home, they went from 125,000 cases of Moscato selling for $3.99 to 3.5 million cases selling for $5.99. And that just blew everything. Moscato blew everything out of water. Rosé, Riesling, red blends, sweet red, you name it, okay? So keep in mind that this kind of data also, you've got to learn to read the data and understand what it means in relationship to an intended market. Does that make sense? Okay. So what they look at in this kind of a program is they look at current sales for the period, this period versus same period last year, percent of change, the share, market share, and whether market share is going up or down, the current value versus the year ago value. And so this is important because if you're looking at the macro element, volume went up in this period by 4.3%, but the actual value of the category only grew 2.1%. So obviously something was going on with pricing and discounting or with cheaper products entering the market. Does that make sense? Okay. So that's how you use this data. Some people hate data. I'm one of them. But I've actually learned to since I've learned to look at it differently, I enjoy it a lot more than I used to. And then they're going to continue on with all sorts of information of share and equivalencies and whatever, but those are the biggies. Okay.
Sorry, Tim.
So, yeah.
That's just in the US.
This is US, yes. So if you're in Canada, if you're in New Zealand, you'd have to find pertinent, for your market. And I'm guessing the liquor control boards and so on actually have a lot of this kind of a data available for Canada. It's one of the advantages of some of the controls against many disadvantages of trying to sell with liquor control boards and that kind of stuff. All right, so that's kind of our macro version of things. And then let's say that we wanted to look at Malbec. Now, for this US report, this is going to be all Malbec by variety. So we're taking a varietal category and then the breakdown, and you can see, who's ranked number one. And this is where if you're watching your wine, you are going to want to pay close attention to the competition. Are you trending up or down against the competition? And Stephen, how many Malbecs do you think might show up from almost 2 years ago in the US?
I have no idea. No idea.
All right. Yeah, and this is also an issue. How many, how crowded is the marketplace, right? And going back to the Moscato example, one of the big Moscato opportunities is that according to the data, Moscato was a tiny, tiny little sliver of business. So people were overlooking it. They didn't know that Moscato was the wine that made White Zinfandel drinkers go, wow. And it's an Italian heritage. And, the harassment of White Zinfandel drinkers has been so strong. White Zin was trending down, but that was the #1 market opportunity to transfer things to. And it's also, Moscato is one of the easiest grapes to grow. You can get really large yields, and it's way easier to make than White Zinfandel. So it's just plus, 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 plus. And that's, going back to our cost of goods and our great costs and everything else. So if we just look at this, and this is an 18 million plus for the number one selling. You can see that this was when Black Box was just entering the market, and they vaulted into number two position with an 83.2% change in growth of their product. So in the competitive analysis, you can also look at what are the successful wines in this category doing, and start then to look at their packaging and their pricing and how they're positioning their product. And then you go on to see, well, but look at how many of these products all went down as the marketplace became so saturated, it's ridiculous. These are 530 Malbecs available in the United States as of a year and 10 months ago. And it's more now. And some of them are tiny. They never even got a toehold. But this is how much pressure there can be for these wines. And then you get some little guy like this, and Paraman RSV Malbec, and its growth went up almost 1,400%. Okay, all right. So this is like on a varietal basis, right? And then also, as you're defining your product, you might be defining it by an even more narrow kind of a basis. And this is for imports. This is Montepulciano. And notice this is from Pivot Stream. And again, you can find this. So Montepulciano, obviously not as big a brand. If you are exporting your wines from Canada to the US, to Finland, to the UK, to Japan, you want to find the data of the market for that market to see what's out there. And in this case, Bosco Montepulciano was the big leader, and then whatever this Lisabella, about half the amount, but you can see how much it grew while the top couple were shrinking. This kind of data also, when you're the producer and you're having your meetings with the distributors, with large accounts like Total Wines and More and so forth, if you're preparing your pitch for the gatekeeper, this is the kind of data you want to be able to demonstrate to them that also you've looked at. Saying, here's where we're positioned now, or this is the market that we're entering into with this new product we're bringing in, or that we're producing. And we're looking to be, to take a certain amount of share, to earn a ranking, and work with you to develop and grow this. And we're willing to spend against it. We've got money budgeted for your sales incentives, for your salespeople. If you're talking to a large hotel chain, you're going to be asked to contribute into their marketing budgets and so forth. And so you've got to be able to know where you stand, what your vision is, because your vision is to be at the top of this heap, maybe. And again, this is Montepulcianos. There's 115 different Montepulcianos in the US market. Okay. So that is how data works at this level. And then the next part of this is to go in and kind of look online at some of this. And again, anybody that finds any cool examples and whatever, bring it on. This is something called Statista. And all you have to do is wine market data, and you'll get all sorts of opportunities. Now, a lot of them are selling as you can see, the whole document is $365. If you're trying to find export market data, you'll have to find the appropriate resources for that. If you are a large winery, again, you may have $1 million budget just for this kind of data, and you're constantly poring over it. The large companies have a whole data division. They prepare all of the presentations for a new product to provide to marketing and to sales, to take into the distributor pitches. They set up sales incentives around positioning. Okay, we're here. If you guys can do this, you get an additional bonus or whatever as an incentive to help us. And it's just a big part of doing business. And this goes as much for Opus and for little wineries as it does. The level of the amount of data, the sophistication, and so forth varies, but everybody should be doing it. And so then you can see what kind of data is available for production. Bottled wine by state, vine bearing area. And again, if you're getting ready to plant a vineyard, this would be a really good thing to go in and look at to see, you know, here's the grapes you're planning to plant. How are they performing price-wise? How does that look in the overall scope of supply and demand and that kind of stuff? Another site that's got more data than most people know, again, going back to the TTB site, and if you need to apply for a permit, if you need to know about import, export, submitting your labels, those kind of things. If we go into beverage alcohol, we can immediately just go to wine, and they have statistics. So monthly and yearly wine statistics. Apparently they're having some technical issues, but they've got monthly and yearly, and as you can see, you can go all the way back to 1984, and a ton of data and statistics there. The Wine Institute in California and similar organizations in New Zealand, places like the Oregon Wine Board for a single state. Virtually every country that produces wine has its organization like this. And so you can see California and US wine sales, California shipments, and whatever. So this organization is a focused, and it's a lobbying entity for the California wine industry. It's also a 501c3, meaning it's got an educational mission and requirements. But there's all sorts of stuff on consumption and sales and whatever in there that you can, and they also then post the California Grape Crush Report. And I don't know why I opened that new tab. Oh, I think it was for Wines and Vines. So another resource, and also a really great thing to just peruse online and as a resource, is Wines and Vines. Wines and Vines is one of the best trade publications, along with Wine Business Monthly and the materials from Wine Industry Network. And that basically, when you go into Wines and Vines, they've got a listing of data services of where you can find data for direct to consumer and these kind of things, but they also have their own metrics home. All right. And so they're showing US total wine sales. And again, these are updated, and they're showing October last year versus October this year. And then you can go in and drill more into that. What's going on in retail off-premise consumption, which is retail stores. direct-to-consumer shipments. And if you're looking for a career or looking for a job or whatever, you can also scope out what's going on in the job market, whether it's up or down or however it is. Okay, so a bunch of information, and then when you go to this pull down, you could say, okay, what's going on with off-premise wine sales, and it's not a huge amount of information, but it gives you volumes and charts, and then a breakdown of share of different things. All right, so lots of places you can go, lots of information to discover, and all part of planning at every level for not only the wine products, but job markets, services provided to the wine industry. Also, if you're selling equipment or lab supplies or yeast or barrels or real estate or so on, having a good understanding of what's going on in the market. So as an example, just got an email from somebody who's looking for property, and my wife's a real estate agent, and we do vineyard acquisitions. If you're looking for a vineyard purchase or to sell your vineyard, you would really want to go in and see in global supply and demand, where are things right now? Are we in an up or down cycle? You could go into statistics for specifically the type of grape that the vineyard is planted to, or you expect it to be planted to. If all the indicators, if you're the buyer and you're looking at a Pinot Noir or what Riesling vineyard or whatever it is, and you see that all the indicators are up and up, you don't want to share that data in the negotiations. But if you're the buyer and you're seeing things are trending down, consumption's leveling off, you actually want to use that as leverage in your negotiation for the vineyard to get the best price. Say, oh, I know you're asking this, but if you looked at the supply and demand trends and where things are, I just couldn't go in at that price. Here's the data, and we'd really like you to bring the price down. Okay. Oops, there's my client. So anyways, there we go. Questions, Mr. Newman?
No, I think we're all right.
All right, great. Well, I'm going to send you out the workbook, the link to the class, and then I'm going to give everybody a copy of these Excel spreadsheets so you can sort of play with the data and see what kind of things are in there. And then off we will go. And then Monday, we're going to talk, kind of wrapping up the sales, marketing, distribution. So any questions anybody has, email them or show up on Monday to let me know. And then we'll start diving into the final end of the course. Let's see. So the world according to Tim might be 2 weeks from today. Yeah, this week 6. So the very last week, I'll give you guys the world according to Tim, probably, unless you want time to argue and question it more. All right. All right. Thank you, sir. Thanks for being on the call.
Thank you, Tim.
All right. Bye, everybody.